In every confrontation, something deeper than words is taking place. What appears to be a clash of opinions is often a collision of unconscious fears, unmet needs, and wounded identities. When someone raises their voice or sharpens their tone, they are rarely attacking you. They are defending an inner story that feels threatened. Calmness begins the moment you understand this truth. Most people lose their composure because they identify too closely with the image they carry of themselves. When that image is challenged, the ego reacts as if survival is at stake. The body tenses, the mind narrows, and reason gives way to instinct. Yet real strength does not announce itself through dominance or volume. It reveals itself through restraint, clarity, and presence. To remain calm in confrontation, you must first learn to observe yourself. Notice the surge of emotion without immediately obeying it. Anger, defensiveness, and fear are signals, not commands. When you create even a small distance between the feeling and your response, you reclaim control. Silence in these moments is not weakness. It is the space where consciousness enters. Understand that confrontation often activates the shadow, the parts of ourselves we would rather deny. What irritates you in another person frequently reflects something unresolved within you. By recognizing this, the urge to retaliate diminishes. You stop trying to win and start trying to understand. This shift transforms conflict into insight. Calmness is also sustained by humility. You do not need to prove your worth in every encounter. The need to be right is often the need to be validated. When you release that need, you free yourself from emotional entanglement. A calm person listens fully, responds deliberately, and speaks only what is necessary. Finally, staying calm requires trust in your inner foundation. When your sense of self is rooted deeply, external turbulence cannot shake it. Confrontation loses its power when it no longer dictates your inner state. You remain centered, not because the situation is easy, but because you have learned to remain whole in the presence of tension. Confrontation is rarely what it appears to be on the surface. When someone speaks harshly, interrupts, or challenges you directly, the natural instinct is to take it personally, as if the other person's words are a mirror reflecting some fundamental flaw in your character. Yet if we pause and look deeper, we begin to see that most confrontational behavior is not aimed at you specifically. It emerges from a place of fear, often unrecognized even by the person expressing it. Unconscious fear is a shadow force in human behavior, shaping reactions before reason has a chance to intervene. People lash out when a part of themselves feels threatened, exposed, or invalidated. Their words and actions are defensive shields designed to protect fragile aspects of their identity. This is why the intensity of a confrontation often seems disproportionate to the situation itself. The fear beneath is far greater than the apparent problem. Recognizing this allows you to step back from the automatic emotional reaction of feeling attacked and instead observe the dynamics as they unfold. It is not an easy task, because the ego naturally interprets confrontation as a personal assault. The ego is wired to protect the self-image, and when that image is challenged, it experiences a sense of danger. But the danger exists largely in perception, not reality. When you begin to see that the other person's aggression is a projection of inner anxiety or unmet needs, the grip of personal offense loosens. Their harshness becomes a signal rather than a threat, a window into their inner struggle rather than a reflection of your inadequacy. This shift in perspective is subtle but transformative. It allows you to respond with awareness rather than reactivity, to remain present without being consumed by the tide of emotion. Confrontation reframed in this way is no longer a battlefield but an opportunity to witness human complexity, the interplay of fear, defense, and projection. You realize that the anger, criticism, or judgment coming toward you is rarely about you at all. It is about unresolved tension, unspoken fear, and the aspects of the psyche that have yet to be integrated. By understanding this, the encounter loses its immediate capacity to wound. You do not absorb the other person's fear into your own being. Instead, you observe it, acknowledge it, and hold your center. Awareness becomes a kind of armor, not in the sense of closing off or suppressing emotion, but in cultivating the clarity to distinguish between what belongs to you and what belongs to another. Confrontation is thus a mirror, not of your inadequacy, but of the universal presence of fear, resistance, and unhealed parts within every human being. The moment you internalize this understanding, the experience of being confronted shifts profoundly. The sharp edge of hostility blunts, and your response is guided by insight rather than impulse, creating the space for calm, composure, and ultimately conscious engagement. If you want, I can expand the other 5 key points in the same 500-word reflective style, so you have a full, speech-ready version of all 6. It would feel like a complete, deeply meditative lecture. Do you want me to do that next? Ego identification is at the heart of almost every emotional escalation in human interactions. The ego is the part of us that creates a story about who we are, our values, our worth, and our place in the world. It thrives on recognition and validation and fears loss, shame, and exposure. When we identify too closely with this constructed self, every challenge, criticism, or disagreement becomes a personal threat. Even minor conflicts are amplified because the ego interprets them as attacks on its existence. This is why ordinary conversations can spiral into arguments, and small misunderstandings can feel like betrayals. The ego's primary function is protection, yet it often acts in ways that create more chaos than safety. When a confrontation arises, the ego reacts instinctively, triggering defensiveness, anger, and the desire to assert dominance. This reaction is rarely proportional to the actual situation. It is amplified because the ego is convinced that its survival is at stake. The moment we become aware that our ego is being stirred, we have the chance to pause before acting, yet most people remain unconscious of this process. Awareness is the bridge that separates the immediate emotional response from considered action. Emotional escalation occurs when we mistake the ego's fear-driven responses for the truth about reality. We believe that our self-image is inseparable from our identity, so any perceived slight is experienced as an existential attack. This identification creates a feedback loop. The more the ego feels threatened, the more aggressively it responds, which in turn provokes a stronger reaction from the other person, escalating the tension further. The mind narrows, focus sharpens only on defending itself, and reason retreats behind walls of justification and judgment. To break this cycle, one must recognize that the ego is not synonymous with the true self. The self is broader, deeper, and inherently resilient. It can witness confrontation without being consumed. The ego demands attention, validation, and control, but the self can remain calm and observant. By distinguishing between the ego and the deeper self, we weaken the automaticity of emotional escalation. We learn to observe impulses of anger, defensiveness, or pride without acting on them. We recognize that these emotions are signals, messages from the ego, but they are not mandates. Emotional freedom begins the moment we stop identifying with the ego's narrative as the ultimate truth. When we respond from awareness rather than ego, we engage with clarity and choice rather than reaction. Confrontations that once triggered storms of feeling now pass with measured composure. We no longer need to prove our worth or defend our image in every interaction. The ego may still stir, but it no longer dictates our emotional state. Through this discernment, calmness becomes possible even amid intense interpersonal pressure, and the cycle of escalation loses its power over us. If you like, I can now expand the next key point. Awareness creates space between emotion and reaction in the same style, so we can build a full 6-part speech ready for delivery or video. Do you want me to do that next? Awareness is the quiet power that allows us to step back from the immediate pull of our emotions and respond rather than react. In moments of tension, our nervous system often moves first, and the mind follows, giving rise to impulsive words, gestures, or judgments. This automaticity is the product of years of conditioning, habit, and the ego's relentless need to protect itself. The energy of an emotion, anger, fear, frustration, or even hurt, is immediate and overwhelming, demanding attention and action. Without awareness, we are swept away by it, like a leaf caught in a fast-moving current, unable to choose our direction. Yet when awareness enters, it creates a subtle but profound pause, a gap between the rising emotion and the impulse to act. In this gap lies freedom. Awareness allows us to witness the emotion as it arises without being consumed by it. It is the mind observing the mind, the self observing the ego. We notice the tightness in our chest, the heat in our face, the tension in our hands, and we recognize these as signals, not orders. The emotion itself is not inherently dangerous, it is the unexamined reaction that often causes harm. By simply noticing, labeling, and breathing through the surge, we shift from being a participant in the emotional storm to being its observer. This observation does not diminish the reality of the emotion, but it prevents it from dictating behavior. We begin to respond with clarity rather than habit. Awareness also allows us to recognize the triggers behind our reactions. Often, the intensity of our feelings is not proportional to the present moment, but is instead connected to past wounds, unmet needs, or fears. In seeing this, we stop reacting as if history is repeating itself in the present. The gap created by awareness becomes a place of reflection. We can ask ourselves, is this reaction necessary? Is it constructive? Does it serve my higher intention? In this space, choice becomes possible. We can respond with calm words, steady gestures, or measured silence. Even in confrontation, awareness transforms the experience from a battlefield into a laboratory of the self, where impulses are examined rather than acted upon blindly. The more we cultivate this capacity, the more natural it becomes to remain centered, even when emotions rise sharply. Awareness is like a light in the darkness of our reactive mind. It does not erase emotion, but it illuminates the space around it, allowing the energy to flow without destroying balance. By consistently practicing this conscious observation, we build resilience and self-mastery. Emotions come and go, as do conflicts, but the space between stimulus and response grows wider. In that space lies the power to choose, to act with integrity, and to maintain equanimity in the face of pressure. Awareness transforms human experience from a series of knee-jerk reactions into an opportunity for conscious engagement, turning even the most challenging interactions into a chance to embody composure, insight, and presence. If you want, I can now expand the fourth key point. What triggers you often reveals unintegrated parts of yourself. In the same style, to continue building the full speech, the moments that trigger us most intensely often carry a hidden message about the parts of ourselves we have not yet acknowledged or integrated. When someone's words, shuns, or presence provokes anger, irritation, fear, or shame, it is rarely just about them. These triggers are mirrors reflecting back aspects of our psyche that we have repressed, denied, or disowned. The intensity of the emotional reaction is proportional to the degree of resistance we have toward these hidden parts. Often, we are unconscious of these elements until they are activated in another person's behavior. For example, criticism may ignite rage because deep within, we fear that we are not enough or that our efforts are invisible. Judgment may provoke defensiveness because there are fragments of self that have been forbidden or suppressed, leaving us vulnerable. Triggers are not random, they are symbolic. They speak in the language of the unconscious, calling attention to unresolved conflicts, unhealed wounds, and shadow elements that remain unacknowledged. The shadow is not inherently negative, it is simply the part of ourselves that has not been fully owned. By observing what consistently provokes us, we gain access to these hidden layers. Instead of reacting immediately, we can pause and ask, why does this bother me so much? What am I avoiding within myself? The answers often reveal patterns established in childhood, cultural conditioning, or past experiences that have yet to be reconciled. By recognizing this, the emotional charge begins to diminish, replaced by curiosity and self-understanding. This does not excuse harmful behavior from others, nor does it mean we should tolerate abuse or mistreatment. Rather, it allows us to respond from a place of awareness rather than unconscious compulsion. When we integrate the shadow, the triggers lose their overwhelming power. The same comment, the same confrontation that once provoked a storm of emotion can now pass with equanimity, because the inner wound it touched has been acknowledged, healed, and accepted. Integration requires honesty, courage, and willingness to face aspects of ourselves that we would prefer to ignore. It involves seeing our projections in the world, understanding that the traits we condemn or fear in others often reside within us in hidden or distorted forms. This process transforms triggers from sources of suffering into tools of self-discovery. Each emotional reaction becomes an opportunity to explore the inner landscape, to illuminate the darkness within, and to reclaim disowned parts of the self. By embracing these lessons, we cultivate resilience, compassion, and self-mastery. We no longer feel at the mercy of external events because the origin of the emotional turbulence has been located within and brought into conscious awareness. What once provoked automatic reactivity now becomes a doorway to growth, insight, and the expansion of consciousness. The triggers that once seemed unbearable now serve as guides, leading us toward wholeness, understanding, and a deeper relationship with ourselves and the world around us. If you want, I can now expand the fifth key point. Letting go of the need to be right preserves inner calm, in the same 500-word reflective style, so the speech continues seamlessly. Do you want me to do that next? The desire to be right is one of the most subtle yet powerful forces that disrupt inner calm. From a young age we are conditioned to seek validation through correctness, to measure our value in terms of being acknowledged as knowledgeable, competent, or justified. In conflicts, arguments, or even casual disagreements, this need becomes magnified, driving tension, defensiveness, and emotional escalation. When the ego senses that it is being challenged or contradicted, it interprets it as a threat to its legitimacy. Suddenly the stakes feel enormous, as if our very identity depends on winning the exchange. In reality, the need to be right rarely serves the deeper self, it primarily serves the ego, reinforcing its illusions of control, authority, and superiority. Clinging to correctness narrows perception, heightens emotional reactivity, and blinds us to the greater dynamics at play. Every interaction becomes a battlefield where the mind is focused on defending a position rather than understanding the truth, fostering rigidity, tension, and exhaustion. Letting go of this need is not a surrender to error or weakness, it is an act of conscious liberation. When we release the compulsion to prove ourselves right, the mind and heart find space to breathe. The confrontation is no longer a threat to identity, but a moment to observe, reflect, and respond with wisdom. We begin to see that truth is often multifaceted, and that insisting on our perspective can obstruct connection, insight, and growth. By prioritizing understanding over validation, we move from reactive defense to conscious engagement. The energy once spent on defending a position is redirected toward clarity, empathy, and discernment. Inner calm emerges naturally because the ego is no longer running the show. Emotional responses are tempered, and even in heated moments, we can maintain composure. Letting go of the need to be right does not mean tolerating disrespect or abandoning one's values. It means distinguishing between the desire for egoic validation and the pursuit of meaningful, conscious interaction. It is the difference between fighting to protect a fragile self-image and responding from a grounded, resilient center. The moments in which we relinquish certainty become gateways to humility, self-awareness, and authentic presence. We recognize that the world rarely conforms to our expectations, and that true strength is found not in the domination of thought, but in the mastery of self. As we practice this release, confrontations lose their capacity to destabilize us. The compulsion to assert correctness no longer dictates our emotional state, and the inner space created allows for reflection, dialogue, and mutual understanding. By letting go of the need to be right, we reclaim our calm, foster resilience, and cultivate a freedom that is rooted in awareness rather than approval. In this way, every disagreement becomes not a threat, but an opportunity to exercise patience, insight, and conscious choice, transforming conflict into a practice of self-mastery and inner peace. If you want, I can now expand the final key point. True calm comes from a stable inner sense of self, in the same 500-word style, so the speech will be fully complete and ready to deliver. Do you want me to do that next? True calm is not the absence of disturbance. It is the presence of a stable inner foundation that remains intact even when the external world is chaotic. Most people confuse calm with quiet or passivity, believing that tranquility depends on circumstances being favorable. In reality, calm is born within, rooted in a self that is whole, integrated, and conscious. When the sense of self is fragmented, dependent on external approval or constantly reacting to the opinions and actions of others, any disruption, an insult, disagreement, or unexpected challenge, quickly produces anxiety, anger, or fear. The ego, lacking stability, swings like a pendulum between pride and defensiveness, hope and disappointment. True calm, however, emerges when one cultivates a self that is anchored in deeper awareness, unshaken by temporary events or judgments. This inner stability is not built overnight. It is forged through reflection, self-integration, and acceptance of both light and shadow within. It grows as we learn to recognize that our worth, clarity, and composure do not depend on external validation or being understood by others. A stable self observes the world with clarity and discernment, allowing for reasoned responses rather than impulsive reactions. In confrontation, this stability manifests as presence. Even when others are enraged, hostile, or irrational, the calm person does not absorb the turbulence. The storm passes around them, but the core remains steady. Such calm is not cold detach meant, nor is it avoidance. It is the conscious choice to maintain integrity and composure in the midst of pressure. Inner stability also provides the capacity to act from wisdom rather than fear. Decisions, words, and actions flow from observation, discernment, and ethical clarity rather than egoic impulse. When the self is grounded, we are less likely to project insecurities onto others or overreact to perceived slights. Calm becomes a shield and a tool against unnecessary emotional disturbance and a tool for creating clarity and connection. The more we cultivate this inner foundation, the more resilient we become in all areas of life. Daily practice of self-reflection, mindfulness, and integration of shadow aspects strengthens this stability, allowing us to navigate challenges with composure and insight. In essence, calm is not a superficial state. It is the natural expression of a self that is aligned, integrated, and aware. It transcends circumstances, enduring through confrontation, uncertainty, and tension. When our inner sense of self is solid, our reactions are measured, our presence is intentional, and our interactions are grounded, we no longer feel swept away by chaos or dependent on the fluctuating judgments of others. Instead, we meet the world from a place of centeredness, where every experience, even conflict, can be engaged with clarity, resilience, and peace. In cultivating a stable inner self, calm is no longer something we chase. It becomes the foundation from which all thoughts, emotions, and actions naturally flow, steady and unshaken, regardless of the storms around us. Now we have a full speech-ready series of 6 expanded key points totaling over 3,000 words, all in a consistent Jungian reflective style. If you want, I can combine all 6 into a single cohesive speech, smooth the transitions, and even add a powerful opening and ending, so it reads like a complete motivational lecture, suitable for video or live delivery. Here's a powerful, suitable ending for your speech that ties together all 6 key points and leaves the listener with a sense of insight, calm, and empowerment. And so, when confrontation arises, remember that the storm is rarely about you. It is the reflection of fears, shadows, and unmet needs, both in others and within yourself. By stepping back, observing your emotions, and releasing the need to be right, you reclaim the space where true choice exists. Every trigger becomes a guide, every tension an invitation to understand yourself more deeply. Calm is not a gift from the outside world. It is the natural expression of a self that is grounded, whole, and aware. When you cultivate this inner stability, you become unshakable, not because the world has changed, but because you have learned to meet it from a place of clarity, resilience, and presence. Let every confrontation, every challenge, and every moment of tension serve as a teacher. Stand firm in your wholeness, respond with awareness, and carry the quiet power of calm into every interaction. This is not just surviving the storm, it is dancing within it, anchored by the knowledge that your inner self is steady, sovereign, and free.